welcome to another episode of Seed Speaks. My name is Allie Roden, and I'm the digital media producer here at Seed World Group. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be your host. Last week on Seed Speaks, you heard two specialists discuss how food safety comes into the seed world. This week, we're tackling the topic of organic versus conventional farming. To help us learn more, we've got two fantastic panelists joining us. Nate Powell-Palm, owner of Cold Spring Organics, and Carrie Spoonemore, co-founder of Park Seeds from Seed to Spoon. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. So let's start with some introductions. Can you tell us more about yourself, Nate?
Sure. So my name's Nate Powell-Palm, and I'm based in Bozeman, Montana. I raise about 1,000 acres of yellow peas, flax, spring wheats, durum, as well as alfalfa for our beef cattle herd. So we've been certified organic since 2008 and started out as a beef company selling slaughter animals to various brokers and wholesale accounts. In 2013, we started growing grain, and in the last 5 years, we've focused a lot on seed production. So we raise certified organic yellow pea seed for certified seed, as well as flax for certified seed.
Awesome. And Carrie, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Carrie Spoonemore. My husband and I are the creators of Park Seeds app From Seed to Spoon, and we started growing our own food in 2014, around that time frame, and we wanted to go all organic, so we've been growing that way and trying to teach others all about it. So everything we recommend in our app is all organic based and everything like that.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions. Let's start off with a basic question to kind of put down some foundation for our conversation. Nate, let's start with you. What are the main differences between organic and conventional farming?
I love that question because I don't think there's anything versus in organic and conventional. It's the same goals. We're looking for good yields, clean fields, and happy farmers and happy customers. When we think about how we get to those good yields and clean fields, that's sort of the difference, is we have a different set of tools that we're going to be using. In organic, we're primarily figuring out how do we utilize organic sources of nitrogen, be it manure or cover crops or other inputs, and how do we grow as much of our fertility as we possibly can. So organic primarily relies on the ecological potential of the farm for maximizing those yields. And we have a lot of little hammers that we use for things like weed control or good seed considerations for maximizing those yields, as opposed to the really big hammers you might have in conventional, like herbicide or synthetic fertilizers.
Awesome. And Carrie, do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, for me, I would just say it's all about being as natural as possible whenever you're growing your own food or anything like that. And just not using any pesticides and making sure that all of your fertilizer, everything that you use is all organic based, or do things like we do, like composting, worm casts, things like that.
Awesome. And what are some benefits of organic farming? And Carrie, we can start off with you this time.
Well, we like to know exactly what's going in our food. So for us, that's the main reason why we wanted to get started growing our own food, was because we wanted to know exactly what was going into our bodies whenever we were eating. So we wanted everything to be as natural as possible. So it's definitely knowing where your food comes from is a huge benefit. And then also just for the environment too, because you don't have all of the chemical fertilizer runoffs into your drinking water, things like that. So it's just so much better for the environment and for your body.
Awesome. And Nate, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah. So when we think about all of the challenges we face in agriculture, from managing soil to building soil to managing how to get more soil organic matter to form, all the way to how do we mitigate runoff and other environmental impacts of agriculture. Organic speaks to all of those in a set of regulations that relies on trying to figure out how to make the most resilient, holistic system that we can. And in doing so, mitigates a ton of the issues that we're facing and actively trying to come up with solutions for on the conventional side.
And so to break it down a bit more, what exactly does certified organic mean, and how is that certification regulated?
Great question. I love that question. So the USDA has the Agricultural Marketing Service, a division of USDA. In the AMS, there's the National Organic Program. And so organic started off as a law, the Organic Foods Production Act, which was passed in 1990 and became a rule in the early 2000s. And from this rule, we have the team at NOP, the National Organic Program, who accredits certifiers, private companies, state departments of agriculture, to actually administer the certification. So we have the standards in the Organic Foods Production Act. So it's one federal standard across everyone who wants to get certified organic. No variations between states or anything like that. One standard, and from that standard, certifiers receive applications from interested farmers. Some basic information is that the land has to be free from prohibited materials for 3 years prior to being eligible to harvest certified organic crops from it. We have to have good record keeping, an organic system plan, which describes all the practices that are going to go on, as well as an inspection every single year. So that farm will receive a live inspector on their farm who goes through, audits the records, and then actually physically tours the farm, checking for any evidence of noncompliance. All of that then goes into a certification decision by one of these 70 certifiers that exist to administer the organic certification. And from there, a certificate is issued.
Awesome. And is that expensive to do?
Great question. So in the Farm Bill, actually, 75% of the cost is covered. It is a reimbursement from the Farm Bill. And so on average, it's a couple $100s out of pocket for an organic certification.
Awesome. So Carrie, I have a question for you. So I know you mentioned earlier that the environmental benefits are a big factor in why you began to go organic. So what exactly are those environmental factors?
Well, for me, I always want to make sure, like fertilizing, we don't use any chemical fertilizers, things like that. And because whenever you spray or do anything like that, it can always run off into streams and rivers, lakes, all of that, and hurt the drinking water and all of that. So I always want to try to make everything as natural as possible to prevent all of that from happening.
Awesome. So I wanted to go ahead and bring in an audience question from Ashley Robinson. So Ashley said that she's heard that yields can be lower with organic crops. So how does that affect your production? And is organic production really feasible to feed large populations? And whoever wants to take that question first.
I'll jump on it and I'll hand it off to you, Carrie. I
Okay.
love this question. So there have been several really great studies. Organics as a codified standard has only been around for about 25 years. And so when we're thinking about the data that describes these systems as they exist under certification, we're now getting some good long-term studies. And the data is showing that after 3 to 5 years, organic yields catch up almost to parity with conventional yields. And so it depends on what kind of crops we're growing. There's a smaller gap between organic and conventional. For say wheat, we can almost match conventional yields in wheat. Corn, we still have a little bit of work to do. But overall, there's an incredible catch up that's gone on between organic and conventional. And we're seeing that there is actually that parity is possible between organic and conventional. The key components to that is a good, robust crop rotation, where you're allowing the soil to experience many different plant species, and that you don't have the same buildup of pressure as if you would have in a recrop where you're growing corn on corn or wheat on wheat. In addition to that, when we think about what sort of crops we're growing, when we're growing primarily food crops in organics, we're trying to figure out how to close the loop on that production system. So if we're raising certified organic corn, say, we're going to be relying on manure in order to fertilize that corn. We can also rely on some pulses, some legumes to augment that manure. But primarily, we're going to be relying on a closer to home source of nitrogen. And in doing so, we're making a more resilient system that in the face of things like supply chain shocks like we experienced this spring, organic was completely fine. Nothing happened in the organic space that made anyone have heartburn that they weren't going to get the best crops that they possibly could. So it's a shorter supply chain in organic, which leads to a more resilient food system, which in turn is something we really need for a growing population. So we're getting parity in yields, and we've got a little bit more of a robust system that's going to result in a more reliable food production system.
Do you have anything to add, Carrie?
Well, he made a lot of terrific points there and a lot of the same things I would have said too. But one thing that I do want to mention too is key things like succession planting and not placing all your bets onto one plant. So what we do a lot of in our garden is we will plant a couple rounds of something such as tomatoes or something like that. And then we'll come back in like a week or two later, do some more. So that way, just in case something does happen, we get a pest issue, a disease, something like that, we aren't focusing all of our energy onto one plant. We have a couple different plants that we can focus on.
Awesome. So speaking of pests, and then I know, Nate, you mentioned earlier how organic farming uses manure. What farm inputs are actually permitted on organic farms, and what materials are permitted?
Good question. So in organics, everything that's natural is considered allowed for organics, except for a few items that we have listed on what's known as the list of prohibited naturals. So things like arsenic or strychnine or other materials that are usually pretty toxic, those are going to be prohibited in organic inputs. Most synthetics, on the other hand, are going to be prohibited in organics, except we have a very specific list of allowed synthetic inputs. And so relying on things like mined minerals when we're looking for gypsum or lime, that's allowed in organic. It has to be from a mined source and not have any synthetic carriers to it. So really we think about it as anything natural allowed in organics, and we have a specific list of tools on the synthetic side that are also allowed in organics.
Awesome. So obviously I've read places that organic farming is increasing. There's more discussion around it. So do you guys want to touch on why there's that increase, and have you seen that, or do you see it kind of stagnant?
Oh, I definitely see a huge improvement in that. So many people are interested in learning more about it, and they just care a lot more about what goes into their body and the environment and all of that. And I think a lot of people are really focusing more on that now.
By the numbers, the certified organic marketplace just hit $63 billion. And it's grown. When I started tracking the numbers in 2016, it was about 48 billion. So it is rapidly expanding. And there's a few reasons to that. Traceability. It's the only codified transparent food system that we have in the US marketplace. And so every single organic product that you see on a shelf can be traced back to the field in which the ingredients were grown. And that transparency is something that consumers are interested in paying more for. The other component is the known climate benefits that organic has. Several studies have shown that organic soils are able to sequester more carbon, that there's better water holding capacity, and that we're shortening that supply chain overall, making a more resilient system. And so as we look to the consumer side, massive growth. As we look to the actual organic land side, also massive growth. We've seen almost a doubling of organic acres between 2016 and 2020.
Awesome. So I want to bring in another audience question from Mark Sinkowitz. So we were talking about how consumers are starting to care more. I know Carrie said about the environment. And so going off of that, does climate change make organic farming more challenging?
Climate change makes everything more challenging for all farmers. And that's the first thing we want to acknowledge is it's a farmer issue, climate change, not an organic or conventional issue. What we are seeing in organics is that our systems are more steady. That when we have a shocking drought like we did in Montana last year, our organic yields they dropped, but they were more consistent than the sharp declines that we saw on the conventional side. So because we have more organic matter in organic soils, typically we see less boom and bust in the yield. It's a more steady state. We do have to contend with the fact that we're going to be getting a lot more droughts. We're getting rain at inconvenient times. We need to be thinking about how to further design the whole farming system, conventional and organic, to react to these. So things like a more diverse crop rotation, much like Carrie said, where we're picking out a bunch of different diverse cash crops to grow on a single farm in order to hedge our bets. Figuring out how we might plant more winter annuals if we're going to be doing our annual rotation, so that we can hedge how much risk we have in the spring. In the Midwest and kind of across the country, we get incredible rainstorms in the springtime that can keep folks from getting in the field. So thinking about how do we adapt to climate change, and how do we prepare for a world where we have much less consistent weather patterns, where we don't have as much ability to assume what the weather is going to be. In that space, organic sort of thrives, that we have more consistent yields, more consistent opportunities to realize those same yields year over year.
Do you have anything to add, Carrie?
No, I think Nate covered all of that. Anything that I would have said, that was perfect.
Awesome. And Nate, I know you said earlier that corn was one of the crops that organic farmers are currently trying to work on the yields for.
Mhm.
What crops are doing well already? And like corn, what other crops are farmers and experts working on to get those yields up?
Yeah, and so it's all relative, right? And so we're able to get parity in wheat at this point. So last year during the drought, a lot of my dryland wheat in Montana exceeded the yields of my conventional neighbors. And so there's a lot of neck and neck there with wheat. We have seen 300 bushel per acre certified organic cornfields. Getting 200 bushels an acre, very common now. The trick is exceeding that. I know in conventional, everybody's staring down high 200s, low 300s, and so we're looking to chase those yields as well. But getting a very consistent 200 and shooting for 300 across the board is both a agronomy question, and it's a bit of a genetics question. That in certified organic seed, we don't use any GMO seeds. That's just one of the pillars that was built into the standards. And so we're using non-genetically modified seeds. And so we have a more narrow seed base to work from, but we're seeing really good yields utilizing the tools that we do have.
Awesome. And then Carrie, on your From Seed to Spoon app, what crops are you seeing your users having the most success with?
Well, I'm pretty much everything. They do really enjoy growing the things that give them a lot from one single plant. So things like beans and peas, things like that you can grow one plant of and get a huge round of harvest from them, and that do really well for both the soil and for their body too.
Awesome. And so I have one final question for you guys. And Nate, we can start with you. What is the greatest misconception surrounding organic farming, in your opinion, and how would you correct it?
I would say there are 5 misconceptions surrounding organic farming, but let's just quickly run through them. The question of organic farming can't feed the world. I think that's a great misconception. As we look at the yield parity that we're getting, we're realizing that there's both a more resilient way to farm, but also one that's going to be able to produce more than enough food across the board. The second is that organics is anti-science. In a way, it's the question of what are we trying to advance in science? When I think about tillage, the way we till today and the tools we have to till and minimize soil disturbance are completely different than the tools we had even in the 80s. And so thinking about the progress that goes into conventional plant breeding, good tillage, advanced crop rotations. We're planting crops in Montana that 30 years ago had never been planted in Montana, and then are now a regular part of our rotation. Thinking about how the ability to realize good yields and realize really resilient farms, so maximizing yield while also maximizing profit, is a really good strength of organics, because we're able to look at how to make sure we're producing enough food for our communities, but doing so in a way that keeps farmers on the land. So anti-science, too much tillage, all of those are sort of pieces that folks throw at organics. That organics is a weedy mess. And I think I really like this picture. This is my yellow pea field from this past spring. And it's just yellow peas. It is really clean. And when we think about how do we get really clean fields, there's a lot of tools we have, a lot of different methods, but the same goals that we have in conventional are the same goals that we have in organic, that we're able to take care of the soil, have profitable farms, produce good, abundant food crops, and do so with style so that we're able to have good, clean fields that don't give the neighbors heartburn.
Those were awesome points. Thank you, Nate.
Yeah, those were great ones. Well, I'd say for me, the most common things that I hear about organic is that it is really expensive and it's really hard to do. So both of those I would definitely say are misconceptions, because like we've been talking today, you can definitely do it easily, and there's things you can do to help you that you don't have to pay for. You can use companion plants, you can use beneficial critters to help you out with pests and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to pay for a lot of these organic fertilizers and things like that. You can keep it cheap and simple, and it's not that hard to do once you know what to do.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Those were awesome answers. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Nate and Carrie, and I hope everyone in our audience took home some fun knowledge today. If you liked this topic, make sure to tune in next week, where my colleague Mark Zinkowitz is talking about better agronomy through hardware and software. See you all then.